Hello and welcome to The Week Ahead. I'm Helen Joyce, International Editor. And on today's show, the consequences of Trump's NATO snub.
It weakens the deterrence that NATO provides for all its member countries.
And is Rio really ready for the Olympics?
If Rio knows to do one thing, it is to throw a party. And it really is rather good at it.
First, we head to America, where the party conventions have played out in the usual fashion, though there were a few surprises.
I make a motion that we have a roll call vote on the rules.
I second the motion. Hillary Clinton must become the next president of the United States.
God bless each and every one of you, and God bless the United States of America.
Trump's speech did shock, though not for the things he said, rather the things he didn't say.
I have visited the laid-off factory workers and the communities crushed by our horrible and unfair trade deals.
He managed to stay on script without the usual digressions.
These are the forgotten men and women of our country.
Hillary Clinton said there was something else missing from that speech, a policy agenda. Here she is on Thursday night at the Democratic Convention.
He spoke for 70-odd minutes, and I do mean odd. And he offered zero solutions. But we already know he doesn't believe these things. No wonder he doesn't like talking about his plans.
Off camera last week, Trump was vocal about foreign policy. In an interview with the New York Times, he questioned America's commitment to defending NATO states, which rattled the country's North Atlantic alliance and shocked the foreign policy establishment. Matthew Symonds, our defence and diplomatic editor, joins me now. Matthew, what exactly did Trump say?
He was asked about his willingness as a NATO ally to come to the defence of the Baltic states if they came under a Russian attack. And he basically said, well, maybe I would, but it would depend upon whether they'd basically paid their dues. So, in other words, there was a condition attached that a President Trump would only come to the aid of a NATO ally if he thought that they deserved defending.
The Obama administration has issued a response. We're going to play a clip now from Josh Earnest, the White House spokesperson.
Let me just be really clear about the policy that this president has pursued, which is a steadfast commitment to our NATO alliance. The cornerstone of that alliance is a pledge that all of the allies have made to mutual self-defense. The U.S. commitment to that pledge is ironclad.
Why has the single remark made by Trump caused so much alarm?
The bedrock of the NATO alliance is something called Article 5, which commits every member to regard an attack on one as an attack on all. That is the basis of collective defence. And in just these few words, Donald Trump basically sort of drove a stake through that principle.
And that's dangerous.
It's extraordinarily dangerous because it weakens the deterrence that NATO provides for all its member countries. The Baltic states are in a particularly exposed position. They are among the weakest of the NATO allies, and they are frontline states in that they share borders with Russia. And after what we have seen of Russia's intervention in Ukraine, not obviously a NATO member, but one can easily envisage the same sort of tactics being used to destabilize Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania, all of whom have quite significant Russian-speaking populations. So these remarks will have made them extremely nervous. They've said how horrified they are, and at the same time, the real danger is that it might embolden a President Putin to do something there which otherwise he would never have even sort of contemplated.
And from America's point of view, its own foreign policy, why does this matter?
I mean, America derives huge benefit from the sort of network of alliances it has with its allies across the world. NATO is probably the most important of all those alliances. If you start to pick away at the principles underpinning NATO, then that sends out a message to every other ally. And these words of Mr. Trump will certainly have been noted in South Korea, Japan, and so on.
In one press conference, Trump went from saying Russia has, quote, no respect for America, to this comment about Hillary Clinton's private emails.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Is Trump playing a dangerous game?
Trump never loses an opportunity to talk about his regard for President Putin and to say how much better Russia and America would get on if he, Donald Trump, were president. It's not entirely clear what the basis of this regard is, other than one guy wanting to appear a strong man, talking about another man who is a strong man, as it were. But also it shows a sort of lack of concern about Russia's, record of breaking international norms, its poor human rights record, and so on. And there is a sense that within the sort of Trump camp, there is a kind of closeness to Russia. His campaign manager, Peter Manafort, used to work for President Yanukovych of Ukraine, the guy who was thrown out of office, really, after the demonstrations in 2014, and who was massively corrupt and very much a sort of Russian stooge. And Peter Manafort was responsible for trying to rebrand his image before all this had kind of happened. And he apparently has other significant business interests in Russia as well. And it is further said that Russians have invested quite significantly in Trump businesses when he is unable to get financing from banks in the US. So there is kind of a closeness there, which I would have thought should be regarded as being pretty worrying.
Matthew Symonds, thanks very much. And to our listeners, if you have any thoughts on Trump's NATO slight, don't forget that you can tweet us at Economist Radio or email us at radio@economist.com. Now we head to Rio de Janeiro, where 2009 marked the start of an ambitious Olympic project for the city.
Rio de Janeiro.
7 years later, the Games will officially launch at the opening ceremonies in Maracanã Stadium on August 5th. Jan Piotrowski, our São Paulo bureau chief, joins me on the line now to discuss the Olympics and the legacy they will leave. Jan, the big question, is Rio ready?
Well, the Games will happen. The opening ceremony will go ahead. The arenas are ready to welcome what could be 500,000 visitors. The transport links are mostly up and running. The metro is behind schedule, but should be operational, at least the organisers promise it will be, by this Saturday, so with 5 days to go before the sporting competitions get cracking. There are troops on the ground which the federal government deployed in order to make sure that the security situation is under control. So in a sense, Rio does indeed seem to be ready.
I mean, of course, Rio hosts a huge festival at Carnival every year and not with that many glitches, so I suppose they're used to this sort of spectacle.
They are. I mean, if Rio knows to do one thing, it is to throw a party, and it really is rather good at it. As Olympics are little more than a very big party, Rio should acquit itself well.
There have been a lot of scandals in the run-up to these games. What's the mood like? Or are people willing to forget about those and get on with having a great time?
When you go to Rio, I spent a week in Rio a couple of weeks ago, people seem oddly joyless. Cariocas, as Rio's residents are known, are world-renowned for being fun and festive. And obviously the carnival is the epitome, the apotheosis of this. But you talk to them now, and they seem without hope. When I ask them, is there hope for Rio, in the overarching question, many of them say there has to be, which betrays a certain resignation, and that is really rather sad.
Rio made a rather different pitch for the Olympics than many other cities. It said that this was going to be the event that would help them to solve problems that they had suffered for decades, and you're saying that doesn't look like having happened.
And this is perhaps one of the bigger paradoxes of the whole situation. There has been a lot of progress. I mean, if the mayor is to be believed, between the time he took office in 2009, which was just before Rio won the right to host the Games. For instance, 18% of Rio's residents had access to high-capacity mass transit. Now, 63% do. Access to family doctors, general practitioners, has increased dramatically. So there has been a lot of improvement. But it just doesn't feel like that when you talk to Cariocas. Perhaps they're expecting even more betterment. Perhaps the fact that security, which is always foremost among Carioca concerns, has deteriorated slightly, and that basically makes it very difficult to enjoy other things in life. There is something of a paradox between what has actually happened in Rio, which is a fair bit, and what its residents feel has happened.
I was so jealous of you for being there, Jan. So for our listeners, I was Jan's predecessor as our Brazil correspondent, and I haven't been back to Brazil since 2013 when he took over from me. Rio felt when I was there like it was having a magic moment. Everything was going so well. The oil price was high. They were still very enthusiastic and excited about the Olympics. Some political scandals that have happened since were not really breaking then. And it has seemed hugely gloomy since. It was a magic moment. Where did it all go?
Part of it has to do with the general gloom in Brazil, and not just in Rio. Brazil is living through its biggest political and economic crisis basically in living memory. It is experiencing its deepest recession since at least the 1930s and possibly ever. Federal politics is completely up in the air. The president is facing trial on impeachment charges. In fact, she could be impeached and booted out for good shortly after the Games end. And so there is a sort of, there is a general gloom. Rio was hit particularly hard, in a way, by everything that's been going on. The big corruption scandal, which is ensnaring a lot of the politicians and which is, in fact, if not on paper, the reason that the president is being impeached, is centered on Petrobras, which is the state-controlled oil giant, which is headquartered in Rio, on which a lot of the Rio state economy depends.
So you mentioned that Dilma is impeached. She's not going to be at the opening ceremony, I gather.
Well, she was invited to attend, but has apparently refused. So no. And it would be a rather odd thing to have both the interim president and the suspended president together, especially since they're at loggerheads, to put it mildly. But yes, I mean, the political turmoil is certainly not helping moods.
So Rio has to be on for the next several weeks, 3 weeks of Olympics and then a break and then back for the Paralympics. So after that, late September or so, what will Rio have been left with as a legacy?
Rio will be left with some legacy, it is true. As I mentioned earlier, there are more hospitals, there are more schools, the transport links are better. Whether the Games were needed to bring that about, the mayor argues yes, because they served as a useful pretext to push everything through. Others may believe that it's something that City Hall should have been doing anyway. But I think, broadly speaking, Rio will go on as it is. It's a fun city, but it is not a great world city. And the Olympics were never going to change that.
Jan Piotrowski, thanks. If you'd like to read our portrait of Rio in the lead up to the Games, pick up the current issue of The Economist or find us online at economist.com. Do join us again next time as we look at the events shaping the week ahead. I'm Helen Joyce. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.